Hi, this is Hale Dwoskin. This week we are re-releasing one of my favorite episodes. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, and I'm sure you'll get even more insights from listening to it again, if you've already heard it.
I think just to emphasize, the demonstration we just did demonstrates very clearly that our true nature is effortless and that experience is effortless and engaging the mind is something different. And being able to make that distinction is going a good way towards total realization.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today we'll be talking with David Bingham, who was a featured teacher along with me in Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret. David was an ordinary, everyday person like you and me, with one difference. After 20 years of searching, he discovered the truth while listening to a podcast, just like you are doing right now.
I would. I sometimes use the analogy of an aeroplane coming into land. Individuality is almost like an aerobatics pilot, and we're sort of flying around and doing all sorts of stunts, and it can be quite a wild experience. But then to come into land, using the Earth as an analogy of the infinite self, we need to align with that. And so the attributes of the infinite self are things like stability, equality, neutrality. And so we really need to bring individuality in alignment with that. And one of the most effective ways to do that is through actually the Sedona method, was a major thing for me, because the subconscious programs create turbulence, and that turbulence tends to be in the form of either, well, I've noticed in my own experience, and also with people who I've spoken to over the past 13 years, we tend to have beliefs to do with lack of self-worth, feelings that we're not lovable, inferiority. Sometimes also there are attachments to spiritual practices, which can also inhibit the possibility.
Definitely.
Actually, one of the major ones is a feeling that we have a guru or a teacher who knows far more than we do, and we always have to look to them. Because unless we can accept our sovereignty, it's not going to be possible to merge with our true nature, because we're holding an intermediary between our own experience and our true nature. So knowing that those elements can inhibit the process, being able to neutralize those is really important, because if we can get into the space of silence, stability, then we can bring the aeroplane of individuality into land. And I found it's a very similar process. The sort of attention that's needed to bring an aeroplane in, it's almost an effortless process. There's no need for any kind of acceleration. We're sort of quietly merging, but there's also that state of attention and awareness, a very simple form of awareness. So that really is the process that I've used. But I would like to demonstrate in our conversation a couple of the ways that I've used quite effectively, because
I'd love that. The more experiential we can make this, the more it's going to help the people who listen to this.
Brilliant.
One of the things that Rhonda emphasizes in the book, which we both very much agree with, is the importance of awareness, and how that is really the goal, to recognize that you are that.
Yes.
So can you talk about that from your own direct experience and, kind of add some juice to that?
Yes. When I listened to the podcast of John Wheeler, back in 2005. It was quite a revelation because he was emphasizing the importance of awareness. But the way he used the language is to kind of depersonalize it, because part of the way our infinite nature, infinite awareness, infinite consciousness appears to be obscured when it never really is through the idea of personalization. So when I'm doing non-dual pointing with people, I tend to try to emphasize the difference between awareness of, because it's awareness that's aware, but the way that is obscured is because language has made us use terms like I am aware of, but our true nature is actually impersonal. It's impersonal awareness. But part of the way that it's obscured is by personalizing it and making it appear as though the individual is aware. So when I speak with people in consultations, and it's mainly been one-to-one consultations, I've found that over the years, it's much more effective to speak with people one-to-one. That's been my experience. But with awareness, it tends to be just kind of refining the language that people are using, because if they're saying, well, I'm aware of the thinking process, or I'm aware of feelings in the body, that tends to keep the idea that awareness belongs to the individual. But by just asking them to use terms such as there is awareness of thinking, there is awareness of emotions in the body, there is awareness of a body sitting on a seat, that enables people to see that awareness is independent of the body mind. And so I tend also to emphasize that even though we've been conditioned to believe that the thinking process is 100% of our consciousness, it's actually less than 1%, because most experiences we have are coming directly and are registered directly in awareness. So making the distinction between the mind and awareness and giving direct examples of that tends to give people the opportunity to see that their true nature is already present. So that's the thing that I tend to emphasize, and I have one or two different strategies depending on the individual, because most people come with certain concepts of limitation, and so the conversation needs to go in a particular direction depending on what those concepts are.
Sure. Kind of adapt to their,
yes,
where they're coming from.
Yes.
You know, you hear this expression that there are 50,000 thoughts a day, and people really are obsessed with those thoughts. So basically what you're doing is helping people recognize that the thinking is the least of them as opposed to the all of them, which is how most people experience it.
Yes, exactly. And also the thing that became apparent is that the opportunity to release subconscious programs can either be before realization or it can be afterwards. But generally, it's much better experientially to resolve as many of those as possible before realization, because I've had one or two experiences where the person has come to me, they've realized their true nature, but it's as though the mind tries to reinstall the programming, and it can do it in quite a severe way. So it can activate those programs in quite an intense way, and it can result in intense experiences. So I tend to emphasize the need for neutralizing the programs before realization.
Sure.
But also I have a kind of follow-up available, so that if people do have those sort of activations, you know, I always encourage them to contact me so that I can help them through them.
Sure. So how do you do that with people? How do you work with them to neutralize the programming?
Well, I actually use lots of the knowledge from you and Lester. So.
Okay, great. It's interesting. We have people all over the world using our material,
Yes.
and I'm thrilled, and it's just always nice to hear, though. So go ahead, tell me exactly, what does that mean for you?
So, for instance, if somebody has a trigger which is to do with low self-worth, I tend to work through and emphasize the attributes of their true nature and try to explain that the game we're playing is having the experience of limitation within the human experience as a means of knowing our true infinite nature by contrast. So that enables us to see the responses, the human responses, the mind responses, the emotional responses, in a way where we can look at them objectively rather than identifying with them. So one of the most effective ways to disconnect from those programs is learning to witness them by effortlessly noticing the thoughts, noticing the emotions, noticing the perceptions. And by doing that, most people that come to me are able to kind of witness the thinking process, witness the emotions and witness perceptions. And that in itself is the means by which we disconnect the energy supply from those experiences.
Mm-hmm. So is there questions you use, or do you just point out that there is witnessing happening? What is it?
Well, I start normally. Well, maybe you could be my guinea pig.
Sure.
You're the person least in need of this process on the planet, but perhaps we could do, because I think it may be easier for people to understand if I actually.
Any way we can demonstrate what you do.
Yes.
Experientially, let's go for it.
Well, let's do that. That would be brilliant. So I tend to begin with a conversation as to where people are in terms of their true nature. So I tend to ask what people feel their true nature is. So that tends to give a basis to begin with. That tends to reveal one or two things. And I also ask if there are any major issues in their life, any major emotional issues, because they tend to reveal the subconscious programs. So from there, I usually begin by asking the person to notice what is effortlessly arising. So beginning by any thoughts effortlessly arising. So could I ask you, Hale, are there any thoughts effortlessly arising in this moment, right in this very moment?
The only thought that arose was, no.
I thought maybe there wouldn't be.
I was curious how this would go, but except as a natural response to the question, the mind was like,
yes. Well, because you're so familiar with silence, it's almost inevitable that would be your response.
Yes.
But
I'm sure there are many people listening to this where the same thing is true. In other words,
yes,
a lot of people who are attracted to what we do are already tasting it. They're wanting more of that. So
exactly.
there's probably a lot of that.
Yes.
I don't think I'm special in that way.
And well, as soon as the mind looks for thoughts, or actually rather, it's more that when we put our attention, when awareness is making thought the object of attention, then the thoughts tend to disappear. But we begin just by asking that very simple question: are there any thoughts arising effortlessly? So there may be thoughts. In your case, we'd just say there's awareness of silence, or there's effortless awareness of no activity in the mind.
Yes. And there's also effortless awareness of sensations, pictures, and sounds.
Yes. Well,
I'm hearing the words that body is saying too.
Yes. And that's what we move on to next. So the next question I tend to ask is, are there any sensations, emotions, feelings arising in the body in this very moment?
Yes. Yes, there's an awareness of breathing and the pressure of the chair on my back and bottom.
Yes.
There's an awareness of my hands. There's also the awareness of the light that's hitting my face and my eyes. This body is illuminated for the purpose of this, doing what we're doing. So there's an awareness of that.
Brilliant.
And there's also an awareness of, how would I describe that? It's a kind of like almost like an inner smile.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So all of those things are effortlessly known. There isn't anything that's required to make those things arise. They're all arising effortlessly in awareness.
Yes.
So the next stage, could you tell me if there are any sensations or perceptions of anything in the room that the body is sitting in?
You mean about the environment?
Yes. So it could just maybe the hum of the computer, or there may be the sound of other people at a distance, or there's certainly awareness of the light in front of Hale.
Well, there's awareness of the general scene of the office. There's the French doors that I'm facing. I have a picture of Lester, actually 2 pictures of Lester on my desk that I can see. There's the awareness of that face and the background behind it.
Really?
Because we're on Zoom, there's also the awareness. There's 2 pictures on the screen. So there's an awareness of this body that it's interesting. It's kind of split. It's interesting to do these because there's the awareness of the sounds coming out of this body, but there's also the awareness of the reflection of the sounds that are off to the side of that body being reflected back, which is very unusual.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So again, all of that content is effortlessly known. There isn't anything that the mind needs to do to make any of those things to arise within awareness.
No, nothing's required.
Brilliant. Okay, so are there any sounds outside the building?
I can't hear anything. I do hear, I have a parrot in the other room, and when I'm on calls, she tends to like to comment.
That's an amazing synchronicity, actually, having the parrot there.
Yes.
Because the next stage of the process I use is to ask the person to provide a commentary on some element of the content that is arising effortlessly. So could Hale just mention something about the parrot? The parrot would be a great one.
Oh, sure. Well,
so something conceptual about the parrot, something.
Oh, conceptual.
An observation, or something, an observation, just a simple observation.
Oh, an observation. Well, she likes to be included in whatever's going on in the house. In this house where my wife and I live, we spend a lot of time in the same room with her, and and her chirps are different depending on what she's trying to communicate.
Right.
And
wonderful.
This one's a slight complaint. It's like you're having fun in the other room, or you're having at least a conversation. I don't know if fun probably or not fun is probably not a concept she has, but there's a conversation going on in the other room and I'm not part of it.
Brilliant. I find that really interesting that self-realization for you has meant the ability to communicate with animals. Just the way you're detecting the subtle differences in the language of the parrot. That's wonderful. But just to return to the demonstration. So just a simple phrase about the parrot would be great, Hale. So just, for instance, she has a lovely color, or I love the sound of her voice, or just a very simple, just a very simple concept.
Yeah, she's a wonderful companion. She's part of the family. And one of the things that we do, we watch television sometimes at night, and she sits on my chest and gets pets, where I rub her behind her neck.
Fantastic.
And sometimes she loves this because it can go on for an hour or two, where she's getting a continuous massage at the back of her head. I wish I had someone do that for me. That would be great.
Well, that's a great demonstration of what I was hoping for, because what I like to demonstrate is the distinction between effortless awareness, effortless being, and engaging the mind. So, for instance, if we take the example of your parrot, there's the direct knowing of the sound of the communication of the parrot in the other room. And that's the sound is being registered directly in effortless being, in effortless awareness. And there's no effort required to do that. And then Hale engaged the mind to say, my parrot comes and sits on me in the evening.
Yes, that was definitely mind.
And that the parrot is a member of the family.
Yes, yes,
So
that's all conceptual. Yeah.
So that's the conceptual element.
Yes.
So the distinction is that we all are already resting as effortless being, effortless awareness, because everything you described up to the point where you were providing a commentary on certain elements of your lovely parrot, all of that was being registered directly in infinite awareness. And there's no effort required for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all already resting as effortless being. It's only that we've been conditioned to believe that all of those things are coming in through the mind, which they're not. The mind is only a commentator. So when the mind is engaged, we engage the mind as we engage the gears in a vehicle. And so we can engage the mind and we provide a commentary. So we can give rise to concepts. So we could say, my parrot is part of the family, or my parrot is very beautiful.
Yes.
And that's on the conceptual level. And that's when the mind is engaged.
Yes.
But as Lester says, every concept is a limitation.
Definitely.
So the nature of your parrot is also infinite, the infinite being with infinite potential. And so when we engage the mind, we're applying a very limited concept to the infinite nature of the infinite being.
Yes.
And self-realization is that simple. It's the simple distinction between effortless being, allowing everything to arise effortlessly, and then seeing that we also have the ability to engage the mind. And we can use the mind for practical purposes. So if we want to do something practical, for instance, to meet on Zoom as we are,
right,
we need to apply certain concepts.
Definitely.
We need to, have the right access code. We may need to make sure the volume is okay. And so the mind is a very useful device, but the process I've just used demonstrates that it's actually very easy to put the mind to one side. And the benefit of that is seeing that we're all actually already resting in our true infinite nature all the time. We just have this secondary device, which is the mind, which is a duality device. It enables us to experience in the subject-object mode of experience.
Yes.
And it's always available to us, and it can be very joyful once we realize that it's available to us as an asset rather than something that's a kind of torture device, which it can also become.
Oh yeah, most people's minds are such torture devices. Oh my God.
But it is a wonderful device, and it enables us to experience duality, which gives rise to the opportunity to experience personal love.
Yes.
And so we can only experience personal love in the subject-object mode of experience. So while we're pretending that we're the individual, or where we're entering into that experience, we can have the experience of personal love.
Yes.
And the more deeply we understand that, the more infinite love can actually move into the channel of individual personal love.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, I was noticing when you asked me to do commentary, there was this loving awareness of the commentary.
Right, yes.
And it was nice to just simply pay attention to that.
Yes. Well, it does deepen. Even as you were describing your parrot, I could feel love arising for the parrot because, you know, the uniqueness. I love animals, and
Yes.
you know, I think one of the things that becomes more noticeable with realization is that we're truly existing in equality with all life forms.
Yes.
And liberation to me is liberation from any sense of hierarchy. So there's total respect for all life forms. And,
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
when we experience on that level, then the forms reveal themselves to us more fully. So the description of your relationship with your parrot, you know, really demonstrates that, because so many people wouldn't have that depth of experience.
Yeah, it's funny. I wouldn't. I, I didn't see that as deep. It was just natural, and
Yes.
And I had just assumed that everyone, when they have a pet, develops a relationship with them. But I guess it's sometimes much more limited than that. I guess I don't really
Yes.
know.
Yes.
I guess I've lost touch with that. But the other thing you reminded me of is part of the reason that Amy and I moved to where we live now is that there's these amazing flocks of birds that winter here. And one of the things we love to do is just be with these huge flocks of birds, because it's just
Wonderful.
it's just exquisite. Just
Yes.
watching, there's nothing you need to do. It's just it's beautiful.
Yes.
And it also reminds me, I was talking to Francis Lucille earlier this week, and one of the things he said that I loved is that there are many doorways to infinite awareness, or he called it the inner garden of awareness. And one of the doorways is beauty.
Yes.
And another one he talked about is love. And it's just nice to look at it that way. There's just something beautiful about that.
Definitely. And also, I think another portal probably is the animal kingdom.
Yes, nature.
Because they're demonstrating innocence and equality, and you know, we're seeing them in their pure form. We're not seeing them as some sort of commodity.
Yes. Well, if you're just observing them, I mean, on a farm, it's a little different.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, there's something about being in nature that does, if you just are just being in nature as opposed to thinking about everything else.
Yes.
It naturally helps you still.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the reasons we tend to go into nature and we like standing in an area where, you know, there's a panoramic view, you know, where we can see distance, is that on some level we're perceiving our infinite nature. When we're in buildings and in rooms, it seems much more limited, but that sense of expansiveness that we can experience when we're outside, it's almost, well, it's giving us a direct experience without knowing what it is really sometimes.
Yes, in fact, that reminded me, when I was very young, I also had this love for nature. And in retrospect, I realized that some of my first experiences of pure awareness were watching sunfish in a pond, or there was one particular sunset when I was in camp where there was just the watching.
Brilliant.
And at the time, I thought nothing of it. It was only decades later that I realized it was a glimpse.
Yes. Yes.
And everyone watching this has probably had experiences like that, where they gotten these glimpses and didn't even realize.
Yes.
We're listening to this. Yes.
And I think what's fascinating, I think your example is a really good one, because you can see how watching the fish takes awareness into a very quiet mode of experience. And also because they kind of glide through the water in an effortless way. It's almost the perception was giving rise to your infinite nature, you know, because it was quiet, it was still, it was effortless. So the attributes of our infinite nature were almost present in the experience. And so it was, you know, a very short step from there to realizing one's, or having a glimpse of one's infinite nature.
Yes, yes. So I want to make sure we cover some of the other things. You said you had a couple of other things you wanted to demonstrate. I've really enjoyed how experiential you've been making your presentation. I love that. So
good.
Anything else we can do in that direction?
Yes, certainly.
The less people have to think about this, the better off they are.
Absolutely. Well, I think just to emphasize, the demonstration we just did demonstrates very clearly that our true nature is effortless and that experience is effortless and engaging the mind is something different. And being able to make that distinction is going a good way towards total realization. The things that tend to come up for people are sometimes because we're so conditioned into the human experience, we're identifying with our personal nature in the way we can identify with a character in a movie. It isn't who we are, but we're so conditioned to experiencing it that we've almost identified with a limitation. So one of the things that people sometimes do is feel, well, self-realization couldn't possibly be for me. I'm only this little human being. You know, how could it be that I'm the totality of existence? And so really, people can consciously accept their infinite, omnipotent nature. And that's very important, because if people are holding the idea that they are only this human being, when really they're the infinite being having a human experience, then that will enable the acceptance of their infinite nature, and it will enable them to see that the individual mind is a device that's available for personal experience. But what is fully present and has always been present is one's infinite awareness. So that's quite an important thing. An incentive is for people to realize that while we're resting as infinite awareness, and it's resting as infinite awareness rather than resting in infinite awareness.
Yes, that's an important distinction, isn't it?
Yes, because we're not the individual resting in infinite awareness, we're the infinite awareness resting in its own nature. And so that's quite an important thing to be aware of. But in terms of human experience, the more we are able to rest in infinite being, rest as infinite awareness, notice everything arising. So it doesn't matter if thoughts are arising, emotions are arising, sensations, perceptions. None of those things are an impediment to our true nature. So while we're resting as infinite being, infinite awareness, we've actually stepped out of the stream of time, which from a health point of view, from the health of the individual body and mind and emotions, is a very good thing to do, because we've actually put the body, mind, and emotions into suspended animation. So there's an incentive to resting as infinite awareness, infinite being. And so if for some people there isn't the possibility of accepting one's true infinite nature immediately, that could be an incentive to just become more familiar with it. And the more familiar we become with our infinite nature, and the more clear we can make the distinction between our infinite nature and the engagement of the mind, then the more easily it will be to realize our true nature. There's another important point I'd like to make, Hale, sure, which is there's a British scientist called Rupert Sheldrake, who you may well have heard of. Mm-hmm. And Rupert Sheldrake has a theory of the morphic field. He calls it the M field. And basically, the morphic field is a field of collective consciousness. And the example he was using was when there were monkeys who were on a particular island, and they were given a task to access food in this device that had been made. And it was a kind of puzzle for them. And when the monkeys on that island had accessed the food and they'd learned how to operate this device, immediately monkeys on another island several hundred miles away were able to do exactly the same thing. And because consciousness, because infinite being, infinite consciousness is a morphic field, the opportunity for self-realization now is much easier than it was, for instance, when Lester realized his true nature. Because the pioneers like Lester, they were the sort of groundbreakers for the rest of us. But
yes,
what's happening,
that's definitely true,
is it's becoming easier and easier. And so that should be encouraging for people, because it's easier now than it ever has been. And I think Rhonda's book is a really important element in this, because
I agree.
In some way, you know, what I love about that is these amazing teachers, you know, with slightly different angles and different procedures have all been brought together, and they're presenting something which is, it's a kind of unanimous presentation, each with slightly different flavors.
Yes, and it's, what's wonderful about it is because they're slightly different flavors, it's almost like awareness or beingness is speaking through multiple voices at the same time.
Yes.
But saying the same thing.
Yes.
And it doesn't really matter which voice says what.
No, exactly.
And that was the beauty of the way Rhonda presented the book. It didn't really matter which voice said what. It was all this beautiful pointing.
Yes.
And to me, it's an indicator that we as a whole are opening to this more in mass consciousness.
Yes, definitely.
And I've also noticed over the years, it's gotten so much easier. I mean, I've been doing this for decades. And it gets progressively easier to help people see what's true over time.
Yes. Yes, it's wonderful in that way. And I feel, I think as you do, that I feel a real bond with all those teachers. I feel very unified with them, and it's enriched my own experience just being a part of that. And because it's such an enriching thing, and I really love that. But as you say, the differences in presentation, they've actually broadened the range of possibilities that are available.
That's how it feels to me. Yeah. That's also why we're doing this podcast. It is, every teacher had some words in the book through the filter, a beautiful filter, but still a filter of Rhonda. And I wanted to give every teacher who's interested, and some aren't, just because they're fine with the way they are. They don't, some of them don't even want any more attention. They may not even have probably agreed to be part of the greatest secret if they realized there was going to be this much attention. But by having these conversations, it's a way to let people see the different ways that grace flows and infinite awareness is speaking. And the other thing is, because it's through so many different experiences, I think it's going to help people see for themselves that it's very available to them. That to me is the most important part. Everyone listening to this
definitely
is the same infinite awareness. And the nice thing about what you've been presenting, David, is it's very simple. It's very direct. It's very available. And that's the way I think it should be.
Well, the self reveals itself to itself.
Yes.
And it seemed to be revealing itself in a fairly random way for quite a long time. But it appears to me that it's now beginning to reveal itself on a mass scale. And so it is easily available. Really, the only element that is required is for there to be a sincere feeling of requiring and wishing to know this.
Yeah.
And if there is, then it's guaranteed.
Early on in the path, I remember hearing this expression. I think it was from Ramesh Balsekar, but I don't think he came up with it. I think he was repeating it, which is, and I think even it was in one of his titles of his book, your head is already in the tiger's mouth.
Yes. I love that. That's brilliant.
And
that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really how it is. My feeling is that everyone listening to these podcasts, who reads Rhonda's book, who goes to the seminars or the satsangs or the talks or the consultations that all the teachers and all the other wonderful teachers on the planet who are pointing towards non-dual awareness.
Yes.
They're just the fact that they're engaged in that means their head is already in the tiger's mouth.
Yes. It may even have been detached from the body.
Yes, hopefully.
I think it's wonderful that you've identified this, though, Hale, because I had a conversation with Rhonda a couple of weeks ago, and when the book first came out, because we both noticed that it was being received in quite a polarized way.
Very well, the whole world is very polarized, so that's not surprising.
Yes. So there were those who had ordered the book and they had a kind of expectation about it and anticipation, and they kind of read it very speedily without sort of allowing it to become absorbed, too deeply. And they were actually trying to use the mind to understand it. And the mind is the wrong instrument. But what I love now is the balance has really shifted, because I think even with the reviews that are appearing, even on places like Amazon, there are so many people who are presenting really fantastic reviews where they really get it, and that the benefit of this knowledge is available, and they're really seeing it deeply. So I think the ones who maybe commented in a fairly cynical way to begin with, I think they're having to pick the book up again and to look at it again, because they've actually missed the greatest secret.
That's why it's called The Secret. Although it's so funny, it's so obvious once you do start to see it. It's like,
yes,
how could I have missed it?
Yes.
But at the same time, for most of us, when we're lost in the linear thinking, it's missed.
Yes.
It's totally missed.
It is. But yeah, just another little angle I'd like to mention.
Oh, please.
Is just, I'm not sure whether you were recording at the moment when we were having this conversation earlier, but just making the distinction between the way we use language, because language tends to obscure our true nature. Yes. Because language can only give rise to concepts, and all concepts are concepts of limitation. So by amending the way we use language can enable and facilitate self-realization much more easily.
Yes.
So when people are looking at the process of noticing forms arising in awareness, it's beneficial to make those observations impersonal.
Yes.
So using terms like, there is awareness of the thinking process, there is awareness of thoughts arising effortlessly.
Yes.
Or there is awareness of emotions arising effortlessly, or sensations, or there's awareness of the body sitting on the seat, or of the parrot in the other room.
Yes.
And to use those sort of terms is beneficial, because it depersonalizes awareness. Because if we're using terms like, I can notice thoughts arising in me, or I'm feeling these emotions, we're then maintaining the personal mode of experience. And it's important to be able to see awareness as an infinite field rather than something that is attached in some way to individuality.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I was going to do is ask you to give some pointers, and that's a perfect pointer. We were recording that in the beginning, but you bringing it up again is perfect, because although you shouldn't change your language with anybody else. They'll think you're weird.
Yes, exactly.
but your own self-talk, if
yes.
you catch yourself in a personal conversation, you can just switch, and you can feel a difference. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. We don't, speak in an artificial way to anyone. But I like the idea. Somebody said to me, someone who's self-realized, they said, I only become the individual when someone knocks my door.
All right.
So we're already, while we're home alone, there is just effortless awareness, and whatever is arising is just arising. And we can be engaging the mind, or we can be resting as infinite being. When someone knocks our door, we become the individual, or we don't become the individual, we assume the role of the individual.
Yes.
So they speak to us as though we are an individual. For instance, my mum, who's 89, I take her with her dog in the morning, and we go for a walk. Unfortunately, she's really healthy. But my mum, she says, David, you need to make sure you're around at the right time when you're coming for lunch today, or something like that. And, so the whole, we have these roles that we play, with our friends and with our family and whatever. And they're each kind of different roles. And the thing with infinite being, infinite consciousness, is we can assume any of those. Yes. And so actually the personal experiences become much richer, because knowing our true nature by contrast enables us to experience our infinite nature within our personal experience. So it just gives, the benefit of self-realization. It just gives such a depth to experience, because we're experiencing the contrast of the limitations of human experience contrasting with our infinite nature. And you tend to find a depth which emerges there. And I think, the way you were describing your relationship with your parrot is a great example of that, because you're not seeing the parrot in a limited way, you're seeing it in an infinite way. And then whether it's a person or an animal or anything that we're viewing, or any possessions we have, we can see them in an infinite way. Yes. And so that just gives a depth to experience that wasn't there before. And also, what I love is see, even when we're conversing with someone who has maybe a limited idea of their own nature, it's wonderful that we can see and respond to them in terms of their infinite nature. Yes,
it's an invitation to see everyone as that.
Yes. Yeah.
I really enjoyed talking with David Bingham, especially his demonstration of the difference between effortless awareness and engaging the mind, and how it shows our true nature is effortless. To learn more about David Bingham, please visit his website, nonconceptualawareness.com. That's www.nonconceptualawareness.com. You will find the link in the podcast notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you can have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levinson's work, and the Sedona method, please visit sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.